Anybody have a question? We just ask that you stand and just speak loud so we're on film. So you're gonna be famous when you get finished. But if you just stand and just make sure everybody can hear what you have to say, and especially these guys, you can come up front if you want to. Use the mic. For local politics, what you said was most important. How do you get young people involved with that? What do you think?
I'd almost like to ask, James Kleinek, who just came here for the first time tonight, or a lot of these guys who've just started coming. You get people involved by talking about it. I mean, that really is the easiest answer. Maybe that's not sort of magic pill or anything, but people want little examples. You get young people involved in local politics by being involved in local politics yourself. That's the first step. Everybody, and we all know this about politics, everyone's got an opinion, but there's not a lot of action. And you'll never, every young person you meet is very informed about politics, and they've got a lot of opinions, but they don't do anything. So by encouraging people to actually get involved, little things even like this club can make a huge difference.
I would also add to that and say that you have to be able to show distinction from the opposition. A lot of times, when I made the switch to leave the Democratic Party, I was looking for an alternative to that. A lot of times what we see in the Republican Party, a lot of times we see a lot of candidates who are very similar to the Democrats. Look at somebody like John McCain, or Lindsey Graham, or Chris Christie, or Mitt Romney for that matter. A lot of times very similar with the liberal policies. So what I was attracted to, certain candidates like from Ron Paul, it was a total opposite of what we saw. And that is when you engage people individually, specifically black people, which is the audience that I target a lot. When you separate people from the group and you hit them one-on-one, and like you said, what are you for? Well, hey, I'm for that too. And you show people the difference between what they believe with the Democratic liberal agenda and what truth says, conservative, Republican, whatever you want to call it. Once you show them the opposite end of what they're believing, if you give people opportunity and you put them in a corner, actually a lot of people are really more conservative than they lead on. That's been my experience. I've run into a lot of black people, being in black families, having a lot of black friends. When you separate them from the group and you pinpoint them and say, what's your view on abortion? What's your view on same-sex marriage? What's your view on low taxes? What's your view on personal responsibility and liberty? Most of them are very conservative. But it's when you get back in the herd mentality, that's when you have the problems. So I would say, show the distinction and give people opportunity, paint them in a corner and let them make a decision. Like you said, what are you for? When you put them in that individual corner and paint them in there, they will show conservative colors more times than not.
And also, young people, it seems, get very fired up about injustice in the world. After you live a few years, you tend to get disillusioned and tend to think, well, this is just the way things are. But maybe they haven't learned yet that this is the way things are, and so they still think that they can change them. So it seems there's two ways that goes. Either that gets channeled into Facebook posts, which generally get more and more disillusioned until they decline into complete apathy. We've certainly seen that. Or the institutions exist, and Regina, you've done a great job of that, of taking all of this energy around injustice and channeling that in a positive direction. And so when people do get fired up for these things, we have to be there to channel that to productive ends.
All right, a little bit in reference to what Brian said. I enjoy painting people in the corner. I don't know if you but actually, it's a lot of fun if you think about it. I want you to try this if you've never done this. Next time you have a family gathering, and some of your family members are liberals, and they think they don't agree with you. They may not, but they might think they don't agree with you. Allow them to really get amped up about whatever they want to discuss. And now you start laying down the facts. And that's how you stand in the corner. Because what's going to happen is they're going to get to a point where they cannot legitimately disagree with you. And when you get right to that one issue, you don't let them go until they give you an answer. And when they give you an answer, if the answer is wrong and they know it's wrong, force them to explain. That's what you mean by paying people. So, and it's a lot of fun. Because one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to come clean or they're going to get mad with you and they're going to call you some names and march out the room, which you want, right?
You've met my sister.
Okay. Any other questions?
So I went to school down in Austin for 6 years. So I was around a young, vibrant group of people that were politically interested in what was going on around them. They definitely had an interest in human rights, had an interest in trying to preserve rights of other people around them. And sometimes they definitely took those out in ways that I personally didn't agree with. But we see this even today. I know recently there's been a memorandum that tried to go through that pushed the idea of marriage and work equality in the city of Dallas. That was essentially trying to establish a sort of a city policy that was trying to redefine marriage, at least at a city sort of level, through this particular resolution that was being passed. Now, one of the things that I saw about this is that when you would read the newspaper headlines that always followed after this, you'd see columnists that would say things like, "I'm glad this is being done because it's just right. Like, this is the right thing to have happen." And this seems to be a popular sentiment that follows through with young people too. It resonates with young people. How do you engage young people that are interested in politics, that are interested in things like human rights, in a way that are able to still capture the important things like family? They're still able to reach out and object to things like this in a way that doesn't seem that doesn't seem to be particularly condescending, or in a way that doesn't seem to make them completely painted in this light of some backward, backcountry kind of folk that isn't looking to the forward of progress and community, I suppose.
Well, yeah, that's a good question, and I think certainly when you talk to young people, you get this, everybody thinks they've got a real informed opinion, but it's really just, this is right. I also went to school in Austin, so I know what it's like. I think to this day I'm the only person to ever convert to Christianity in the philosophy department at UT Austin. And made that alive somehow. I'm going to go back to the same point. It's about really respecting the person you're talking to. It really is about love. It's about finding out why do they think this? Because it's probably not just because it's just right. And probably there's something that they value there. And you need to find out what it is that they value. Because if you're just trying to tell them your view, then you're not any better than they are them trying to tell you theirs. Right? You want to have a real conversation with someone, because that's how things get done. And that really is rhetoric, that's communication, that's helping other people make those same arguments. Right? But keep asking, what do you value? Because I guarantee you're going to get down at some point to something that the both of you value. And then you get to figure out how to value it best. Right? And that takes patience is what that takes. It takes humility. And it takes knowing what you're talking about too, because if you don't, then you're going to sound like an idiot. And a lot of people sound like idiots.
I take a slightly different approach with that topic. I'm a born-again Christian, but I don't deal with the moral issue with gay marriage or same-sex marriage, so to speak, because I look at the same-sex marriage debate as in 1984, the movie 1984, Winston was being convinced that 2 + 2 = 5. Well, we all know that 2 + 2 is 4. So I don't waste my time on the argument, redefining marriage. I don't waste my time on argument. God's already settled what a marriage is: one man, one woman. The number line is already established. We know the line. We know the alphabet. That's already established. I'm not going to argue with people who want to argue that 2 + 2 is 5, or marriage is between a man and a man. I just don't argue that. What I do is I tell people to look at the basis of the argument from the actual standpoint that they really have the issue with, the same-sex people have the issue with. and that is the financial aspect of it, or the visitation rights at hospitals, or the insurance policies, or passing their pensions on to their loved one, and those sorts. That's the real issue right there. Because you banning their marriage isn't going to stop them from being together. I don't support same-sex marriage, but whatever those people do, that's their business. Just as long as they don't impose upon my rights and my liberties and force my children to learn it and accept it as normal. I don't accept it as normal. But I don't argue the moral issue because God has already settled the moral issue. I agree with God's word. That's the end of it. And I think we spend too much time in the religious community arguing issues that we already know are cemented in God's word. You know, so that's just the way I look at it.
If I could just add to that, there is such thing as evangelism now, and I agree that you can't start with same-sex marriage because the difference is so much more fundamental, like whether we create our own natures or whether we kind of inherit our natures, right? Because that goes far before same-sex marriage and way back to a lot of other issues too. And we can disagree on that, and maybe it is more productive to start talking about those more fundamental issues rather than jumping straight into same-sex marriage where you know that you don't even have the same language there.
You're going first next time.
All right, as far as that issue, to answer your question, you have to make a judgment call. This is my opinion, and may not necessarily agree with theirs, but I think that you have to make a judgment call when you're going to debate an issue with somebody, whether or not it's worthy of the debate. And keep in mind that what we're trying to share is the truth of whatever the discussion is. So when somebody wants to debate me on whether or not we should legitimize same-sex marriage, I'm going to back them up to what is the absolute truth. Okay? And when we get down to that, then they're going to have to make a choice at some point to either accept it or reject it. When we back it up to absolute truth, many times we're not just talking about same-sex marriage, we're talking about the issues in general, which I'm not saying they trump it, but it's one of the, whatever the issue is, we're going to deal with it from a truthful perspective. What is your source of truth? It's not your truth versus my truth, it's the truth. What is the truth? If you don't believe in that, that's the issue we have to deal with first, which goes back to what Josh was talking about. It comes down to evangelism. So, sure.
The other thing is that I think it is. We don't start with issues that we think are going to be kind of productive, but we should be having conversations about, well, what do we value? What should our society be for? That's part of the human scale side, is reducing the scope of government down from this federal level where all we can do is be at constant war with each other to this local scale where we can say, no, we value. We have certain values. We believe that these things are good, that society should be structured this way. Let's organize and build a society that actually has these shared values, because if you eliminate all value and it's just you leave me alone and I'll leave you alone, and you eliminate community, you eliminate all of these intermediate institutions, that's essentially what's happened, and the result of that is totalitarianism. We can't stand up to a totalitarian government if we don't have these local institutions, if we don't actually have institutions that are based on value. If we're all individual atoms, then we're completely vulnerable. So.
All right, next question.
I have a question.
Sure.
Well, actually, it's a statement. It's in line with, I think it's very apropos to this discussion. And this is what Dr. Ron Paul said about same-sex marriage, and I'd like to read it. It said, "We would do well to heed the words of Ron Paul." Quote, "When asked of his opinion about same-sex marriage, he said, quote, biblically and historically, the government was very uninvolved in marriage, in same-sex marriage." He said, "I like that idea, and I don't know why we should register our marriages with the federal government. I think marriage is a sacrament." Matter of fact, I'd like to see all governments out of marriage. The question is, it's not a state function. I think marriage is a religious function. And I think he really made it so succinct that it's not a matter of gay marriage or not marriage. When have we allowed the federal government to determine who's married and who's not? It's just a financial issue, as you were saying. So I think we would all do well to heed the statement that it's a religious function and not a federal government function.
Okay. I think that in regard to that, probably most people take the position that we have an understanding that marriage is really left up to the states, right? And so we'd have to back up a whole lot of stuff in regard to laws in order to get it back that way. So it's a lot of work we have to do. Anybody else want to have a comment on that? Next question. Okay, we got Chuck, and we have you, then Chuck.
I'm a certified old guy. And for the last 6 years, so I'm in my 6 years now, I pray, and my wife does too, regularly for young people. We concentrate on school-age children in our prayers. And it's regular weekly thing during the school year. So as a result of constantly praying, you want to be praying what God wants you to pray. You want to pray something productive, something real, not just what you think. You want to pray what God prays. And so God begins to show you things. And God has shown me a lot, and in some interaction with teachers, with today's students, I was clearly shown one day about the principle of the apprentice. You know, we've talked about the Dark Ages, medieval times. I remember in school that we were taught about the master-apprentice craftsman program, you know, where the apprentices were trained to be craftsmen and actually went to live with the master craftsman. And one day, praying for students, God showed me, well, you know, the apprentice appreciated being an apprentice. He knew that he was young, he didn't know a lot, and that this master craftsman was planting into his life and showing him things that would cause him to prosper and learn and be able to serve other people and be paid and raise a family and prosper and do well. He appreciated that. And then I came to learn that that's something missing in today's society. And I've seen that with young guys who work for me. They think they already know everything. And in speaking with some teachers, they have told me that students, when they're given some of these tests they have to take every year, they think they're evil. They don't think it's right that they should be forced to take this test and prove what they know. You know, that they see that as some kind of evil and as an obstruction. They don't see it as something positive and something that's a process they have to learn in. And we have with us tonight Mr. Jeff Milburn, who's part of the young gang. And he and I have had some great conversations, and we met because he also served high school students as a professional. He was invited into high schools to help them with their occupational training. And he has seen this too. I'd like for him to tell you his statement on it. And this is something we have to deal with in today's society. What the things we're talking about, but we got some real fundamental problems we got to deal with in this society. If you don't mind sharing what you've learned in school about, you know, about what you see.
Okay, so I guess your comment is basically that we need to have more of a connection between the older and the younger, and for the benefit of, you know, passing on some knowledge. Is that correct?
Yeah, our educational policies.
All right, we have, I can't remember your name, sir. John. John.
I want to follow up on the gay marriage thing a little bit. You have argued that it's primarily financial. I don't think that's correct. Marriage has a role in courts of law. You don't have to testify against your spouse because marital conversation is privileged. There is division of property when people get divorced. There's child custody. Marriage is a very complicated contract. Now, I've heard many younger, more libertarian-minded Republicans argue that we should de-emphasize the role of civic marriage. It seems to me that that's impractical. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, again, God has already determined what marriage is. So,
Yeah, but our courts need to know what marriage is. They will inevitably have to rule on marriage-related matters.
okay, well, what are they going to do? Go against what God has stated as? No, I understand. No, I understand that courts have done that, but I'm just saying, but is that the right thing to do? Do we, just like I said with Winston in 1984, do we change the law just because people think it's okay?
Well, no, I'm with you on that, but I'm saying that eventually courts will rule on matters that are marital. Are they going to do so on the basis of a common law that they create? Or are they going to do so on the basis of the statutory law that our legislators create? Or can we assume that they will correctly interpret divine law? Which experience suggests to me that we cannot assume.
Well, you know, the court have ruled that it's okay to murder babies in the womb. And the scripture clearly says that thou shalt not kill, which means thou shalt not murder. And we have murdered 55 million babies in America and counting. So if we leave it up to the court to determine what's divine, we are being in a lot of trouble.
Well, I'm not saying for 1 minute that we should leave it to the courts to determine what's divine. All I'm saying is that the scriptures are clear. And whether or not you and I agree or you and I agree or whatever, we just have to put the right people in office to uphold that which is true and correct. And those people are going to appoint judges and whatnot, or we're going to elect judges. And we just have to have that same sort of people of conviction that are serving with us.
I think this kind of goes back to the point where we can't take value out of politics, right? We can't construct a society where we all just leave each other alone and then expect the government to pick up the pieces when things go wrong, because if we don't give them the value, they will determine what the value is themselves, right? The only way that we can actually have an effect on the society that we build is if we lower the scale, right? Make it so that the power isn't so centralized, so that it's more decentralized, it's more subsidiary, so that on these issues, we make the decision, we make the value decision of what marriage is in our community, in our city, in our state, that sort of thing. But I think it is highly problematic. You're still going to have problems, but it's highly problematic to push this up to the federal courts. And actually, Republicans are just as guilty of doing this as Democrats, because they were one of the forces to push this up to a higher level. And of course, DOMA was also a defense against what Hawaii was doing, and there's a long story there. But anyway, I think we should just be very careful about trying to wage culture wars on the federal level. Instead, we should try to keep these values in the culture. Right, exactly.
I was just going to add, just to build the culture, instead of culture wars, you cannot weaponize culture. That's something we say a lot. But all these comments are appreciated, but let's maybe get back to what we're for and not what we're against. Any more questions?
I just had a question. I think it's an interesting concept we talked about over here in regards to whether we're going to be having court decide on marriage issues based on statute or their own common law. I'd like to know, how do you prove someone's married?
I think that's probably a question for discussion after the panel.
What was the question?
I mean,
What was the question? Can you repeat this, your question? Yes. The gentleman here. Yes. What was your question?
How do you prove that someone's married?
How do you prove that someone is married?
Yeah, if I have a woman here sitting next to me and we claim that we're husband and wife, how do we prove that in a court? I would figure there would be signed statements if you're going to do that in court. Signed statements. I am married to Jody. And I would think it would be the same thing with someone who is some whatever kind of
Adverse possession. Adverse possession.
You're talking about statutory laws. I don't think statutory laws necessarily prove that someone is married to another person.
Well,
normally when you get married in the church, it's a certificate of marriage, nothing else.
I'll equate to a sworn statement.
No more discussions on gay marriage. Seriously. There we go.
He had his hand up.
You next.
Ye-
All right, back to the young issue. One of the problems I see today, young and old, people don't know what the Constitution says. They don't know what their rights are. So when the government, this establishment government, when they start propelling their laws, people don't know that they're getting violated. So how can we start teaching these youngsters at grade school, in high school, in college? How can we get the Constitution in their classes? How can we get constitutional classes? And let them have debates over it. Let them, how can we interject this? Do we go to our PTA meetings? Or what do we do? Do we go to our, what do you suggest? I mean,
I suggest watching Andy Griffith with your children.
I mean, ultimately, there's no systematic solution to that problem. I guess one can make an argument that we even no longer live in a constitutional republic because it seems the Constitution is completely ignored. But really, we have to have families, have children, teach our children, build schools, homeschool, not allow our children to be exposed to ideas, or at least early on, ideas which are against reason, right? Against law, natural law, these sorts of things. Ultimately, it's going to have to be us. We're going to have to build the culture. There's no system that we're going to magically put in place from the top and things are going to be fixed. We're going to have to be virtuous. But it doesn't take a lot, right? Because it only takes a few virtuous people doing what's right, spread around, and that has a certain magnetism. People are drawn to those people, and they see their lives and they want to live like them, right? I mean, it's the gospel, right? So I think ultimately it's on us. We've got to do it, and we have to start with the families.
Just one question. Would you agree that, on the statement of Ron Paul, that not that marriage should be at the local level, but that any state should be out of the issue of marriage? Now, the reason why I ask that is because some of the states under Napoleonic law, like Louisiana and Florida, have two separate dominions for marriage. One is a religious union and one is the state union, and they're both just as effective. What would you say to that? That most Republicans would say bring it to the state level, but Ron Paul says take it out. So what would you say to that?
I don't know if we want to revisit the issue, but I would just say that it's impossible to completely exercise value from government at some level, and that I'm not sure what that would look like.
Okay,
We're in the back of the room.
Speak up.
I'm going to talk about one thing, but now I'm going to talk about something else.
Speak loud.
Regarding your question about the Constitution, I'm a fifth grade teacher, and fifth grade you teach American history. My children leave fifth grade knowing the Bill of Rights, and they leave the fifth grade knowing what the three articles of the Constitution are. Awesome. And they're dual language. Awesome. And they get very enthusiastic about the Bill of Rights. It's almost comical. It's almost like a melodrama. Anyway, okay, you make me think of us 35 years ago. 35 years ago, we became very active in the Republican Party because of certain principles that we were very passionate about. And at that time, our focus was on changing our state platform. There were certain planks that we wanted to see go into our state platform, and we worked very hard to see to it that those got into the platform, and we had to work for several more years after that to be sure that they stayed in the platform. They have not always been adhered to, but they're there. Okay, as far as I know, they're all still there, and some have been added if you're very much agreement. The thing that concerns me, I think, first of all, I want to applaud you for your conservatism, and I want to applaud you for your enthusiasm, your dedication. Yes. The thing that concerned me about the Ron Paul movement was that it seemed to be centered in a person.
person is gone, how do you get young people involved? Are you waiting for another person to come along? Or do you have a way that you can take this beyond a person and make the passion become about principles?
I would say, thank you so much for those kind words, that it wasn't about principle the whole time. That it was never about Ron Paul. Ron Paul would be the first person to tell you that. That it was about the principles, and they were represented in that manner. In the same way, I don't think that we would say Reagan was about a person, or Goldwater was about a person, or Taft was about a person, or Washington was about a person. Washington was about ideals and principles, and he embodied these. So many of our founding fathers were like this. Ron Paul was like this too, for a new generation, who did not see in him just a person, but a person who stood on principles. And so that is a challenge now, certainly. Well, always in community we need leaders and we need people to step forward. And Ron Paul is still doing that outside of politics now, but we need other people. We need people from this group. We need people on a local level doing that. I certainly agree. But I do think it was about principle from the beginning, and if we can keep it about principle going forward, then it'll keep working.
And if we solely concentrate on power, right? It seems like a lot of commentators on TV, it's all a power play of one person versus another, and then nothing seems possible, right? When it's all real politics, nothing is really possible other than what's possible through power. But when you see people with principles stand up, it actually shows that what is possible is far greater than what you see on TV, far greater than just these power struggles and things like that. That principle increases what you can get accomplished. And I think Ron Paul embodied that, but certainly, hopefully, others will too.
I just wanted to address real quick. Yeah, I agree with him. It was definitely always about principle. But when Ron Paul came on the scene and got involved in the 2008 election and started speaking, getting vocal in the debates, I think a lot of people, young people especially, like, yeah, I'm signing up for that. That's what I'm talking about, right there. And they haven't seen it in other people. So when he came on the scene and really said those things and articulated it clearly in a form that everybody could understand, it seemed to be about the man, but it was about the principle. He just happened to embody it and to articulate it very well.
What happened to those young people after he went away?
Okay, well, that was the second point.
Some of you.
Right, that was the second point. Right, that was the second point when I was going to address. In 2006, 2007, when the Tea Party started coming about, it wasn't a conservative deal. It was independents, Democrats, and Republicans who were tired of the two-party system. And they all came together, and they were like, yeah, I like what these guys are talking about. Individual liberty, lower taxes, less government. So, and it was a nonpartisan across the board deal. People who were tired of the big government cabal of Washington. And then the people at Fox News and Glenn Beck and Sarah Palin, seemed to take the reins and say, yeah, we're the Tea Party. And then the news media made it a left versus right thing. And it was just more divided. The division just came in, and we forgot that it was a nonpartisan movement initially, grassroots, organic movement. It became a left-right. Those people are racist, and then that's when all that mess came in again. So the message got lost in the divisiveness of the race baiters and the Chris Matthews and the Jesse Jacksons and those characters, and it got hijacked. But you said, now where are the young people?
Well, the huge crowds that we saw from Ron Paul, that was encouraging to see
Right.
people had become interested in conservative issues. Even we didn't agree with everything he said, they were interested and they were passionate about conservative issues.
Right.
But it seemed like, now you guys have stayed with the cause, but it seems like after the election was over, Ron Paul came in, a lot of that started to fizzle out.
Right.
How do you get that?
Well,
Without
I was
how do you get that back?
I was at the Republican convention, and that's where I met Eugene. And a lot of those people that I was at the convention with had left the party, and they were very upset about what happened in Tampa, and a lot of things that happened, and more of the top-down, the small minority on the top that is dictating what's going on in the party. They're just tired of it. And unless the Republican Party, really gets their mind and really what's going on, you're gonna lose a lot more people. Because there's a lot of energetic people who really got on fire during the 2008 and the 2012 election. You know, I hope some of them come back, but a lot of them are gone.
Okay, we have.
Yeah. My question to the three Republican white guys on the stage and the black guy, my question is that what type of ideal are you formulating in your mind and your thoughts to attract blacks and the Latinos to the Republican Party? And to my friend on the other side, I would say, what type of ideal are you formulating that would take that would reach out to the black community and say, hey, this is what the Republican Party stands for, and this is why you should be Republican?
What I have found to be the most effective in my world, when I deal with people, is one-on-one. Because you get people out of that. If you ever watch MSNBC, and I don't know why you want to do that, but if you just happen to watch it, and you watch somebody like Chris Matthew and Torre, they're just mindless idiots. And they appeal to people who are, I don't want to say uneducated, but gullible, vulnerable, and not too well informed about what's going on. Anybody who watches MSNBC and CNN and they consider themselves informed, you might as well just go watch paint dry. You'll be more productive doing that. But people who actually want the truth and are hungry for the truth seekers, if you separate them and separate them from their emotions, separate them from their color, separate them from their heritage and their church and what their pastor told them, and just sit them down and talk to them truth one-on-one, it's going to take a lot of work because you're going to have to talk to a lot of people individually. But if you win one person, if I win one person, if he wins one person, if he wins one person, and we all go win another person, and then everybody we won goes and win another person, I think we can be very effective because it's very personal. Because if you look at the news in general, the idea is that the Republicans are just white racists and they hate us. I hear that from my family all the time. Now, when you talk to them on an individual basis, you talk about the actual issues. I don't care about the people that's in the party. Let's talk about the issues and which party is closer to the issues that you believe in. Well, that's when you can really have the dialogue. I'm talking about with the people who are educated and want to know the truth.
Regina right here, and we got Leslie back there, and we have this guy with no question. Okay, Regina, you're next. What's up?
Well, getting back to what you were saying about getting the young people involved, I saw a lot of people involved. And a lot of what Ron Paul did was he respected them. He didn't think of them as kids and they didn't know what they were doing or thinking. You know, they listened to him and he listened to them, you know. And then when they got involved, you know, when the kids are there, you know, give them something to do and let them go with it, you know. And then it's that whole deal of love, and that's the respect and love, you know. And that's what Ron Paul showed. And so I see these guys, they all met through Ron Paul, most of them, and they're still working. And why they left, and if you see that some of them left, was because of the cold shoulder they get. So when you want to include your Hispanic people, your black people, you want to embrace them, you have to really embrace them, not kind of embrace them to get their vote. You have to really get to know the kids, get to know the black people, get to know the Mexican people, and integrate with them and understand where they're coming from, what their needs are, who they are, and become a family. That's what I constantly talk about. These kids know. And that's where you'll really have the bonding. And that's what Ron Paul did. Even, you know, I believe he did.
Just to add to that, what you're saying, just to add real quick what you're saying, my brother's like he's a high school teacher at Skyline, and he sees that, you know, kids follow their friends. You know, young people follow their friends. They trust their friends. And so if we can become friends, that's how you that's what everybody's been saying all night. But I think on an individual basis, at least
It's not only us, it's not politics, it's not even policy in persons. At the end of the day.
so especially with this generation, they don't trust authority. They don't listen to the teacher, like you said earlier, like Chuck was saying, you know, so much. But if we become a friend.
I have an observation and I have a question for the young people that are in SC 23. My observation is that the later in SB 23, we really try to bring in the young people. When we identify them, we put them on committees. We've had like Sal on the platform committee and like Lucas on the platform committee. We send them as delegates, as many as we can, to the state convention. And then we also sent to national convention, Sal and Jeff and Lucas and I can't think of any others. But anyway, well, we didn't go with SB 23. And then our SREC, we had Michael Fucci and we had Angie King. And she got districted out, but she was from SB 23. So when we had, oh yeah, and you got to go, you went through a different way. Yeah, that was pretty cool. He has a big story. But anyway, my point is that we try to identify. So my question for y'all in SB 23 is, do you have feedback for us? And also, can you bring your friends in to SB 23 and identify yourself before the convention or before the precinct, so that, like when Sal came the first time, remember the Ron Paul, was it the Ron Paul group then, or?
In 2008?
Was it, yeah, 2008?
Yeah.
And that was the first time we saw him. And he's basically, him and his group was basically shut out. And I remember talking on the parking lot, not with you, but with some others, like, come back next time. You really have to start 2 weeks before, because we're having committee meetings 2 weeks before, and by the time we get to the convention, it's over. Everything's planned, everything's scripted, and we're going. And so he listened to us. And then he came back with his friends and with some of them, and then we were able to get him in, plugged in. So that's my challenge to the people, the young ones in SB 23, not only for the young ones, but for the Hispanics and for the African Americans. I think you would note in SB 23, if you compare us to the other SBs in this area, we don't have fights. Like when we were having our nice peaceful meeting in Dallas, they were having stabbings. And they were shutting, no, seriously, no, they were shutting down their convention or shutting out a whole group of people and not letting them speak. But we tried to do that. And even the Log Cabin Republicans, because we have part of Oakland in our group, they have a voice in our group. It's do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think that's the leadership's point of view. And you have that when the chairman of the platform committee was Keith, and then before him was Clint. When I was involved, Clint Sterry, they would hear them out, they would show them. They got voted down at the platform committee level, but then they would take time and say, look, this is the process that you can bring it to the SD convention. And then when it was voted down there, they would say, look, this is how you can do it at the state convention level. So everyone, I think, this is my observation, everyone in our SD has a voice. And if you feel like that you're being shut out, talk to us, and we want to open it up. So anyway, that's my comment. And I'd like to hear from Sal or Jeff or those people who have experienced, young people in our group that have experienced it.
Your thoughtful presentation emphasized the importance of stating what you're for rather than what you're against. But I'm wondering that when you're in a political campaign trying to distinguish yourself from your opponent, namely a Republican opponent or Republican primary, isn't there room for just criticism of your opponent's past and position of policies? And if so, what that looks like, because it seems that part of the picture is indeed emphasizing and holding a central what you're for, but that really comes out in relief when you make a case for what it's like now. This is a contrast between the two. I think Ron Paul did that well. Some of the debates saying this is what it's like now. Here's what it could be like if we, made some good changes. So I'm wondering what just critique looks like in terms of, more the negative side.
Well, I think that's a very astute observation, and I think that's a bit of a different circumstance. And we're talking about here. We're talking about how to get young people involved broadly in the conservative movements. I do think that you're right. Of course, you can't just being for things is always going to entail being against things. As St. Augustine says, the shadows illuminate the colors. right? You need that contrast always. You know, but if I've got young people involved in Republican primary battles, and if we're trying to figure out how to, you know, talk to them about that, then great. Those are problems I want to have. I want to have young people actually involved already in primary battles. First, we need to get them to figure out that it's important in the first place. And then, you know, I would say still keep with the same rules of humility, you know, personality, love with you there, but that would be different.
In your presentation, you said that you're for human rights. I know how you define human rights. Like, I know, I guess according to the Constitution, you talk about like, what they resonate with, the idea of creating people like Hobbes and Locke. Do you define human rights according to that? Would you be willing to redefine the Constitution based on a wider idea of human rights, or where do you draw the line?
That's an excellent question, and that's where a lot of these conversations go when you talk to young people about rights. It's just, what are rights? Do they come from the government? Do they come from God? Do they come from both? If they come from God, well, what are they exactly? How do we figure out what they are? I don't know if I want to sort of give an answer to that. It would very much be my answer, if you will, apparently. But I do think that's exact. I think that what that question says to me is how important it is that we be able to have intelligent, thoughtful, consistent views about these things, and not just say, because when one side says, well, we have a right to this, and the other side says, you don't have that right. Well, what's really at issue is rights in human nature, and so we've got to be able to have exactly that discussion, and I think a lot of people can't.
Well, quite simply, the Declaration of Independence says that these unalienable rights are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and that's it right there. Everybody has their rights of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, or at least they should. So when we start going, down the path, and I won't bring them again, but the gay people try to associate, make it's civil rights. Well, no, everybody has their civil rights. They're individual life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. It's not a group thing.
I mean, maybe it's important to look at where rights come from. Ancient statutes, definition of rights, but universal human rights apply to every single person, comes out when the Spanish, we were talking about the Spanish were conquering and enslaving Indians in the New World and killing many people. And they were debating, well, can we do this? Are these actual persons or not persons? And so the whole concept of rights comes out as a way to bind states, prevent states from aggressing and from violating the minimum requirements of justice of the human person. And so if we disagree about what the human person is, we're going to disagree with what rights are, right? And that's where I would orient those discussions about, well, what does human person mean? What does dignity mean? And then the rights are going to flow from that. So, and the minimum requirements of justice are expected that, like liberty and property.
Basic question. I think we could argue philosophical differences all day long. But I think what gives me is when I see young people and I see the elderly, it doesn't matter what race it is, they've all got a fixed income. I don't know many young people who are starting off $50,000 a year, getting 10% raises in the following year in order to keep up with what I think are the basic principles, period. Can you feed your family? Do you make enough income in order to pay the bills? Are our taxes continuing to increase? And are we getting the biggest bang for the buck that the politicians are now asking, which I got a survey from John Donner said, are we really doing our job? Would you care to comment?
No.
I agree. Here's not the issue though. I don't care if it's Democrat or Republican. Neither one are doing the job that we ever put them in office. The bottom line comes down, it doesn't matter what race it is, who it is, they got to have an income. They've got to be able to feed their family.
And I still believe what the dollar says, in God we trust. He didn't tell me different religions. He told me to respect religion. He told me to understand what people are doing. And my question to young people is, my son makes $55,000 a year now. Because we had to work around his taxes, he's paying $6,000 a year in taxes. I'm probably giving far more information than I should. But that leaves him roughly about $3,900 a month to bring home. His student loan, if I threw it on his back, it would cost him $1,500 a month. If I take the $39 minus $1,500 a month for his student loan, that leaves him $2,400 a month to live on. He has to make a car payment, pay rent, or a house payment, take care of medical bills, and hopefully find a young lady one day who is of similar belief and practice.
And is wealthy.
It doesn't matter what age you are. My question of young people, if you care enough about your country and you want to bring this Republican Party together, it's evident that the elderly, those above 60, whatever, they can't do it by themselves. It's already proven. The Republican Party's already been told, you know what? This old white 60-plus years of age is no longer in the majority. Look at Dallas County alone. Look at the diversity of the people. That's my basic premise. What do you need to make a living? And how long are you willing to let your taxes continue to increase?
In the
Your government really not represent you.
Well, I think this is a really good question, and in part actually because I want to turn it around a bit. I work from home basically, which is to say that my office is a coffee shop, and so I spend a lot of time hanging around young people, younger people in college still and just out of college. And I think all the things that you asked are extremely important questions. I worry about these same things myself. I'm in very much that same position. But a lot of the voters who were on this graph earlier, they're not in that position. They're not trying to support a family yet. These economic issues that we understand are very important, and they're going to understand soon enough how important they are. But right now they don't. A lot of them don't. They don't care about that. That doesn't motivate them. That doesn't get them excited. You can talk to them about it. They'll agree, maybe. But we talked about the young people being motivated by changing the world. Here's the crazy ones, and challenge and idealism. That's what motivates them. Yeah, you're right. I mean, everyone who knows young people says they really should care a lot more about their finances, but they don't. So, tell them that and say, you'll listen to me one day, and they will one day. But in the meantime, let's figure out what really motivates them.
I do want to add a little something there, because one of the things that got me to look at Ralph initially was Austrian economics, but it was really, it was an injustice, right? You talk about taxes, but by far the largest tax is inflation. We have this massive transfer from the poor, the people who are furthest away from the government, to the people who are closest to the government, government contractors and their employees, anyone who touches government money. And it's silent, and the politicians love it because they can fund everything. They never have to, go and say, well, we have to raise your taxes, right? And consequently, it's had a huge effect on our economy. We've had this massive distortion such that all this wealth has moved to the finance industry. Wealth has moved away from manufacturing, which directly hurts the trades, which you're talking about, right? My business partner tried to get involved in teaching kids in trades. But it's hard to find the jobs out there because a lot of these manufacturing jobs have moved overseas. And finally, you look at the statistics. The median male wage now is lower than it was in 1964, right? Our economic policies, and that's why, when we talk about the young do get upset when their future is essentially being taken away from them, and they do get upset about injustice. And so if you talk about financial reasons, one of the reasons why people got so involved, young people got so fed up or passionate about the Federal Reserve, who is certainly bears a lot of responsibility here, is that they saw the injustice. They saw their future being taken away by profligate spending politicians, silently, and no one cared, no one noticed.
tonight, and we're going to take Sal since he didn't have a chance to ask a question.
Lighten it up a little bit, and specifically it's directed to the gentleman on the left, that man right there. I think we all recognize that it's hard to speak to young people in terms of their economic well-being or their families because those are not primary concerns of theirs. How do we take advantage of the culture scene? How do we kind of manipulate that to invite more young people towards our ideas, and maybe not just arts and culture, but we can extend it even to technology for the other guys to talk about, because I know you guys are huge tech nerds. And you saw the Obama administration use a lot of the analytics and whatnot. And it seems to me that we're really going to need that kind of stuff and that youthful energy and that knowledge of technology to really, compete with Democrats for one. But how do we wrap our arms around the culture? How do we use that to our advantage to bring young people in?
Okay, I run a hip hop website, or a few different websites. Everything I do is all internet based, and generally hip hop is not conservative. You don't typically have Republicans listen to hip hop. So what I do personally, like every now and then, I'll post issues on the site that are important to me that I think more people need to know about. So this past year or two, I've posted a lot of stuff about all the things that Obama is doing that he campaigned on stopping. Like he campaigned that he was going to close Guantanamo Bay, repeal the Patriot Act. As we all know, Guantanamo is still open. He re-signed the Patriot Act, and then he also signed the NDAA, which has the provision for indefinite detention of Americans without due process or trial. So I'll just bring certain issues like that, make awareness of it, to just so people know what's going on, because a lot of people are just apathetic these days. And just about everybody that I went to high school with, I'd say 75% of them, they're either Democrat or they are just not involved in politics. So
let me answer that question. That youth culture that you're connected to, do they care specifically about civil liberties issues, and why do you think that is?
Well, for
I guess rebellion against authority kind of thing.
Oh, that's what good.
Well, civil liberties are an important issue for them because primarily they're minorities. As we see, things like the drug war has been going on for many years. African Americans are unproportionately incarcerated, for these unjust drug laws. So we'll bring issues like that up. Yeah.
All right, great.
I think